Hello, hello, everyone. Happy Monday. This doesn't feel like a Monday at all. Oh my God. It's not a Monday for my guest here. It's already a Tuesday for him. But guys, I am so excited to have with me here Scott Newman. Now, many of you know, you probably got introduced to Scott either by the recent story in the New York Post, or many of you I know saw the video that I did about his story last week. And we're so excited to have you, Scott, because on this channel, I talk a lot about my concerns with what's going on, not just in higher education, but also in high schools, middle schools. And I have many concerns about many things, but I was so impressed with your story because you realized some of the nonsense at a really young age. And I was like, if we can just bottle that and get it out to everyone so they understand what they're getting into, that's going to be a really good thing. So we're going to learn more about that and your experience because your story is really fascinating. But I want to make sure we get you introduced to everyone before we jump into the conversation. Scott Newman is a current senior at Princeton and the author of The Night Before the Morning After, which chronicles the stranger than fiction but larger than life experiences of a 20-something Manhattanite as he wades through adolescence and into adulthood. Scott's story was recently featured in the New York Post, and links to purchase his book is in the description below. Welcome to my channel, Scott.
Thanks for having me on. I'm excited to be here.
Right on. So I wonder if you could just give the audience maybe a general overview of just your background. You come from a very, well, I hate to use the word, but privileged background. And I just want people to learn a little bit more about that.
Sure. So I grew up, or just in the way of introduction, I'm Scott, as I was introduced. I grew up in New York as a triplet, 3 boys, which was really an interesting experience. Grew up in New York for most of my life. When I was about 13, my mother passed away after a long battle with cancer, which was really difficult for the 3 of us. So I certainly came from a privileged background, though, privilege comes in different shapes and forms. It was difficult for me and my brothers, but after that, we got really close. The 3 of us went off to 3 separate high schools. I had sort of the adventure bug, I guess, and I started traveling extensively at a very young age. From the time I was 14, I was doing quite a bit of somewhat independent travel, which was eye-opening, and I'm extremely fortunate to have been able to do that, and it was great. I lived in France for a while. I got a scholarship to study Arabic in Jordan. It was all expenses paid by the government, which was really cool. I currently live in Australia, and I just sort of traveled around seeking out interesting experiences, both domestically, working for politicians and doing various internships and whatnot, all kinds of stuff on the Arab-Israeli conflict as well. And then later on, by some clerical error, I ended up getting admitted to Princeton, where I went, and my experience was in not some ways what I anticipated that it might have been. Continued with the travel and the experiences and whatnot when I could, but sort of just what I cover in the book and how I've led my life is trying to just seek out interesting experiences wherever they present themselves, and hop through the window of opportunity before it closes.
Right on. So, I mean, you said that you got into Princeton due to a clerical error, but it wasn't really a clerical error. You hustled to get into Princeton.
Yeah, that was a bit of a joke. Certainly. I hustled quite a bit. I spent 4 years busting my butt, going through all the various steps of the admissions process, and as I may have alluded to, and frankly, a lot of this didn't come through in the New York Post article, which was short and rather focused on a few specific things rather than the full picture. But and Princeton, by the way, that's not my whole story. That's 1 out of 22 chapters in the book. But in terms of the admissions process, I busted my butt for 4 years, as we can talk about. Like academic, your grades and your test scores are just the tip of the iceberg that will get your foot in the door. But with 42,000 applicants, that's the baseline minimum really of what you need, and then you need to just do all kinds of extracurriculars. And frankly, I was interested in the extracurriculars I was doing. I was passionate about a lot of these things. It's just the extent to which I did them, and the number that I did, and how early I was doing them. Figuring out at 14, 15 years old that your life's work is to solve the Arab-Israeli conflict or to do whatever that's frankly, you can be passionate about something, but it's not a lot of 14-year-olds that wake up and decide that they're going to save the world. Frankly, a lot of it is on some level oriented towards presenting yourself as this polished, accomplished candidate for admission.
Mm-hmm. And we can certainly talk about other parts of your story as well, but I definitely want to cover the Princeton stuff, because this is definitely something important. I loved how you put that as these weren't things that you were necessarily dispassionate about, but it was a means to an end. It seems like you
I think
it was a goal.
It was definitely a goal that you were working towards, and that's not. You're working towards a goal in anything you do in life, whether you're trying to get a job or whatever. But certainly I think the extent to which colleges have essentially made admissions nearly impossible. They want this impossible standard that is extremely difficult to live up to. There's a great book, really what I modeled my college candidacy on was this book by Cal Newport, who's a professor at Georgetown, called How to Be a High School Superstar. And I don't consider myself to be a superstar by any means, but this book was essentially a how-to guide, a manual on what to do. And his contention really was that doing something that's hard to explain is better than doing something that's hard to do. So, winning your state chess tournament or winning your state math tournament or whatever is obviously really hard to do. But doing something that's sort of difficult to explain sort of bodes better within the college admissions process. And I don't think, I think he's certainly right. That presents you as a better candidate. It certainly did for me, but it also led me to have a lot of a lot of these interesting experiences that I had going to Jordan, doing all this other stuff. Sure, at some level was in service of going to college, but his advice, I think, was good for, in some ways for life too, because you do all these other interesting things.
Mm-hmm. Did your brothers kind of go through a similar process, or were you different in that regard?
I'd rather not speak about my brothers and my family on this. Yeah.
That's fine. That's fine. So you worked your butt off. You got into Princeton. What were you expecting out of your college experience?
Certainly, I think college is a place where people should go to open their minds. And in some ways, I felt when I went to Princeton that it was a place where people came out 4 years later with slightly more closed minds than open minds. And I certainly don't think that that's a problem specific to Princeton. I think it's a problem with academia in general, and with the way that college works nowadays. But I had thought that in some ways, because Princeton is the #1 school, it's Princeton, it has all this pomp and glamour around it, that it would be this place of intellectual exchange. And what I found in some ways, in really growth. But what I found in some ways was that, it wasn't particularly different from other schools insofar as that a lot of people, I think, come out more closed-minded than they come in.
Mm-hmm. Would you say, I guess, how would you frame your own experience in that regard? You're still in school at this point, but I think you kind of, your mind seems to have opened up. Would you say that you are more open-minded now than when you came in, rather than more closed-minded?
Well, I think certainly, yeah. I don't think I'm particularly special or some kind of maybe in some ways, I don't know. I don't think I'm particularly special, but I think certainly during my first few years at Princeton, I was definitely becoming a bit more closed-minded and sort of narrowing in on one specific path that I thought particularly related to career choices, which I thought were sort of the thing to do, the natural next step, the natural progression. And I mean, to give a simple example of this, you look at most traditional, not even traditional is not the right word, but the most popular majors at Princeton. I don't have the statistics present, but I'm fairly certain they're computer science and economics. You look at all these traditional disciplines, whether it's English or history or French or sociology, whatever. And they've in some ways become orphaned to these like mega majors that attract a huge portion of the student body. And naturally that's in service of pursuing specific career choices. And there's nothing wrong with pursuing specific career choices per se, but again, in terms of opening your mind, having this place of intellectual exchange, debate, yada yada yada, I found that the huddled masses were sort of flocking to the same 3 or 4 majors in the same way that they do at every other school, which was disappointing to me.
Mm-hmm. Have you ever heard of a book called The Happiness Advantage?
No, I heard of the happiness hypothesis, but not the happiness advantage.
I actually have both of them. But the reason I bring the happiness advantage up is that it actually specifically talks about the phenomena you just described at Harvard. And I suspect it's very similar in all the Ivy League schools, which is you've got this big group of kids that, and I'm way older than you, so I might refer to you as a kid. Please don't take offense. Yeah. So you've got this big group of young adults, and they have worked their butts off to get into these schools. They've done all the things you did. They did all the extracurriculars. They sold themselves to these schools, and they think that getting into Princeton or Harvard or wherever is the thing that's going to make them happy when they achieve that goal. Well, once you get there, then you have to be in the right major, and that's going to make you happy. And once you get there, then you have to graduate top of your class. That's going to make you happy. And once you get there, you have to get that perfect job. Yeah, they're never happy just with what they have. It's about always reaching that next step. So it's that kind of constant, perpetual act of chasing. And what they actually found at Harvard is that about half of the students are actually clinically depressed because they never can find happiness. They're always just chasing it. How does that resonate with your experience?
I haven't conducted a social psychology study, but I wouldn't be shocked if the number were the same, if not higher, particularly with grade deflation and other things. There's a lot of very unhappy people walking around Princeton's campus, which is a bit of a shame. And, you brought up this book, The Happiness Advantage. There's another one that resonated with me called Excellent Sheep by William Dershowitz. I don't know if you're familiar. No. I would recommend. It's called Excellent Sheep, The Miseducation of the American Elite and the Way to a Meaningful Life. There's another article in The Atlantic from like 15 years ago called Lost in the Meritocracy, which is actually about Princeton. And just sort of this idea that you produce all these kids who are really, really good at taking the SATs and really, really good at, presenting themselves in certain ways. But you miss a lot of like the emotional intelligence, the character, all that other stuff. And that was 15 years ago. Things have changed a little bit now. But in terms of, I haven't read this book, The Happiness Advantage, but in terms of how you described it, I think that certainly resonates. I think there's always this dissatisfaction with where you are and this idea that you need to sort of one up the other. But I think it's again, this isn't specific to Princeton. What was disappointing to me was that Princeton was not exempt from any of this, despite the reputation and being number one and all this other stuff. Like, I think within American culture at large, there's a sort of obsession with materialism. People are extremely goal-oriented, extremely materialistic and goal-focused. And the consequence of that, or one consequence of that, is that there's not really an appreciation or an understanding of the people around you. Many hands make light work. Like, people working together can get something done a lot more quickly than everyone just sort of trying to like go as fast as they can, take the steepest slope possible to just like surpass everyone else along the way. And it was just surprising to me anyway, that you go to a place, you walk around, people don't. One small thing I noticed was that people don't really wave at each other when they're walking past, even if they know each other on campus. And I don't know why this is. I would imagine that it has something to do with the fact that everyone is super busy, everyone's on their own little mission. Maybe it's sort of one of those things where like you yawn in a room and then everyone else yawns subconsciously, and like you don't want to be the only one waving. And this isn't everybody, it's just one thing. A lot of people don't say hello to each other, and I think it's because everyone's just very busy on their own mission. And there's nothing wrong with necessarily having goals, but I think there's less of a focus on collaboration and more of a focus on sort of just doing what's sort of pursuing your own little mission, whatever that is, potentially at the expense of other people. It's just American materialism at its finest. And there's that quote, if I think it was Chaucer, if gold rusts, what will iron do? Now, I don't think that people who go to Princeton are necessarily gold, or that they deserve any special place above anyone else in society, but it's an interesting quote. If gold rusts, if Princeton is the #1 school, and you don't have open dialogue, and you don't have people from both sides of not just political, but also political aisle coming in and discussing things, and really learning from the other point of view, what is everyone else going to do? What are all these other colleges going to do? And you see the same problem within politics too. The left is extremely far to the left, and the right is extremely far to the right, and no one wants to go to the middle. No one goes to the center anymore. No one wants to make a compromise. No one wants to do anything that will deviate from the far side of whatever they are. There's party polarization has been going on for years now, though I think certainly it's been exacerbated recently by both sides. And I think that spills over into a college campus, within the academic environment, within the social environment, and within even within the recruiting environment. And it's not the fault of these kids that they're being recruited so young, that you have to decide what you want to do by 17 years old before you even get to college, if you want to go to college at all. It's the fault of these recruiting timelines, particularly for certain industries that have been accelerated really, really far ahead. I mean, there are high school programs now for certain industries that require a college education. So it's not like being a welder or a carpenter or whatever, where you go to like trade school or you learn how to do it on the job. There are industries that you need to go to college, or they require a college diploma in order to hire you, that they start recruiting but when you're in high school. So I think everything has just been accelerated, and people get stuck on their paths and their own like narrow worldview, and there's less of taking time to listen to the other. Does that make sense?
It makes complete sense. And that was actually, I mean, you kind of hit the nail on the head about why I wanted to talk to you, because you said that you're nothing special. I beg to differ about that. I think you having the realization that you did at your age, given the way you grew up, given your experience, given how hard you worked to get into Princeton, that's exceptional. And I really want you to emphasize how important this is. Most people do not have the realization you did at your age. I mean, it took me into like my 30s before I had this realization that you had. And I remember reading the New York Post story and thinking, oh my God, if he had gone and become an investment banker, he would have been miserable. Like, that would have been miserable. Like, you're running around Australia, you're having a great time, you want to be a writer. If someone had stuck you in an investment banking job, like, you may have made tons of money and had all the things you ever needed, but I can't imagine that would have actually made you happy.
I think certainly for me, it wouldn't have personally made me happy. I will say I don't want to knock on investment banking as a profession, just because for some people that is what they're passionate about. For some people, they want to take the social mobility elevator up. They need to feed their families, and that's a great way to do it, especially for a couple of years. That's fine. For me, I just knew in terms of my aptitude, like what makes me happy. Aptitude, maybe that wasn't the right word. Well, I could have done it. I think, in terms of finding meaning for me personally, it's not something that I enjoy. I studied for it. I did like a lot of the case studies, and I didn't ever interview for it, because by the time the interviews had come around, I decided that it wasn't something I wanted to do. Or maybe I did one or two, but for me anyway, I think it's really important to sort of like if you're going to run headlong towards a goal, and I write about this in the book, you should run like hell. You should fight like hell. You should do whatever you need to do to get in, to like get towards that goal, blood, sweat, tears, lay it on the line. I just think you should really question what that goal is, why it's meaningful to you, and you should check in with yourself along the way. When I was 14 or 15 or however old I was, I made the decision that I was going to go to Harvard, Princeton, Stanford, or Yale. There was no question about it in my mind. I just ran as fast as I possibly could at the goal. And like eventually I got there, but I think what I didn't do was check in with myself, every year, or every 6 months or every 5 months and say, is this the path that I want to go down? Is this the path that's going to, bring me meaning in life and that's interesting to me? It was almost like you're going down the highway, and then, maybe you take an exit. Whenever I started, getting into when the lines get dotted and I started getting into the exit lane, it was like I would just rip the steering wheel over to the right or the left and get back onto the highway. And it's like, this is your goal. This is what you're doing. Don't ask questions. Just good soldier it and do it. And for me, this wasn't, my parents or my dad, because as I mentioned, my mother passed away. This wasn't anyone else making me do it. I decided for myself that it's something I wanted to do. I wanted to prove to myself and to everyone who doubted me that I could do it. I wanted this great place of intellectual exchange. I wanted to grow and to learn in the company of all these great alums and whatever, and to participate in a tradition that was much larger than myself. And what I found there was that, at least in this day and age, as I sort of talked about, this goal-focused materialism that pervades American culture was very much present at a place that I thought it wouldn't necessarily be. So, I guess my advice, if I'm even in any place to give advice, would be to check in with yourself. If you're going to fight for something, fight like hell. Just make damn sure you know whatever it is that you're fighting for. And check in with yourself. People say plan out your career in 5-year increments. I'm not one to give career advice because I'm only 22. I'm still building my career as a writer. But check in with yourself every now and then and say, am I still, what am I working towards? Why am I working towards it? And is now the time to pivot, or should we just, keep at it, And if the answer is keep at it, this is definitely what I still want, then, keep on running, lace up your shoes and sprint.
Yeah. I think what so I'm an organizational psychologist in real life when I'm not complaining on YouTube. And so I actually wrote a book specifically giving this type of advice. And what you said is absolutely perfect. It's all about knowing what makes you happy and checking in and saying, am I still on track for this? And I think you also said something really important about the investment banking piece, which is that is the perfect job for someone. That is the perfect job for a lot of people out there. It just wasn't the perfect job for you. And to have that realization early on is so critical. And I think that so many people, I think you're absolutely right that so many people are so focused on the goal or doing what they think they need to do to earn a living that they don't stop and ask themselves, is this going to make me happy? There's absolutely nothing wrong with going to trade school and being a welder. And a lot of people do very well with that. And it makes them a lot happier than, going and working in a place where they have to wear a suit and tie all day. And I think that, for my money, we need to stop placing a lot less judgment on what the different career options are based on how much money you think you can make or what you think it looks like, and being socially acceptable and all that. I think it's a real shame that so many people are in jobs that they hate. But I want to ask you, so you got to Princeton, you achieved your goal. When did it start dawning on you that maybe you weren't on the right track?
Well, I think a lot of it took making part of why I wrote this book was that I want people to learn, from some of my mistakes. That's what this is really about. I was there with the best of them, doing all of this stuff, and the only reason I am able to talk about it is because I did it. I'm not sitting in sitting from my high chair in the bleachers and criticizing the baseball players and telling them how they should, throw a curveball. Well, I guess, I don't think there was a specific moment or a time where I was just, I had an epiphany. I just, over time, I sort of realized, I think it was definitely after 2 years there, having done a lot of the student organizations, having been through the ringer with the recruiting process, or just seeing how early it starts, and which is really within the first week of getting to campus, getting a better sense of the social environment on campus, really just adjusting to the place, acclimating. It's a 4-year degree. I spent 2 years there. And I just realized one day, particularly by spending time with people off campus, traveling, and not necessarily by traveling, but by, they call it the orange bubble for a reason, and when you're in the orange bubble, you don't really see the social laws and rules and strange things that govern the orange bubble. When you step out of the orange bubble, you look back in and you realize some of this stuff is strange. Even from whether it's certain songs that we sing, or the way that we, play certain sports games, or whatever it is, you step out and you realize that the standards and traditions it's not necessarily that they're strange, it's just that they're not the way everyone does it. But I think certainly a lot of people feel, and what was bothersome to me was a lot of people feel that way, the orange bubble way, is the best way and the only way, when in reality it's just one way of doing things. I hope I'm not speaking too abstractly. It wasn't one night drinking a martini where I said, that's it, or one night where I was walking down campus and I saw this kid doing this one thing, or someone was doing a piece of performance art and it just clicked. It was very much I'm just making sure we still have battery. It was very much it was a gradual realization.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So what made you want to be a writer?
I'm glad you asked. Yeah, it's totally different. What made me want to be a writer? I've always wanted to be a writer. I was writing short stories and novellas and fan fiction and all this other stuff when I was in high school. I was like, I went to that thing at Breadloaf. I was going to creative writing workshops and classes and stuff from the time I was like 14 or 15. So I was always interested in the written word, but I was almost always writing fiction, frankly, or journalism. So one of the two. Like I was writing for the school newspaper, or I was writing for the literary magazine, and writing novellas, and I wrote a novella, short stories, fan fiction, flash fiction, all kinds of stuff. I think for me, it's just, maybe if I could do something else, I would. If I could be a race car driver, I would. Writing is always just what I've been good at. I was never very good at math or science. I was never very good at, geology or whatever. Words always just sort of made sense to me. I loved my English classes. I loved the humanities. I loved, telling stories and hearing how other people told stories and sharing unique perspectives. And like learning how other people live their life, seeing how they did it. When opportunity came knocking, I was at work one day, my sophomore summer of college, and I got an email or a LinkedIn message or something. I don't remember what it was. Saying, hey, I've seen some of the stuff you're doing for various publications, whatever. Do you want to write a book? And I looked into it. I looked into the program that it was like the publishing company. And I was like, fuck yeah, I want to write a book. So I started writing a book in August of 2019. And here we are. And I have another one coming out in July, actually.
That's awesome.
Yeah, writing always just made sense to me. Organizing words on the page. I added people's cover letters all the time. I just enjoy doing it, and people seem to, for the most part, like reading what what I write. This book was interesting because it was the first, 22-year-olds don't write memoirs. That's not a thing that people do. And I was writing the book as fiction, and one of my editors was like, "Hey, Scott, where are you getting all these crazy stories? You got kidnapped in Jordan, you got deported from England, you've been to 40 countries, you had all these scandalous relationships with much older women. Like, where, or your character did, where are you inventing this stuff from? Where are you pulling this from?" And I was like, "Michael, this is all, for the most part, true. This is, heavily rooted in fact." And he said, "Well, then write this as a memoir." And I said, 22-year-olds don't write memoirs. And he said, "Yeah, exactly." And I said, "Okay, fuck it. We'll write this as a memoir." So here we are, and people seem to like it. So, we are where we are.
It's doing very well. I checked in on it to put it in the description for our stream, and I saw it was like #1 in a couple different categories on Amazon. So not too shabby.
And I appreciate that. Yeah, it is #1 across a few categories on Princeton. It's been #1 on Amazon. It's sat as a #1 new release. And I would encourage you to go and leave a review on Amazon as well, please. Just because after the New York Post article came out, a number of rather disgruntled Princeton students took to Amazon, so to leave their own ideas on the book. A lot of them haven't read it, but all of this is just to say, whatever you write, whether you like it or you hate it, you'll be in great company.
Well, okay, Scott, we're gonna hook you up because I have some experience with getting negative reviews from people who didn't actually read my book. And so, guys, if you're in the chat, you got a couple hundred people here now. Please make sure to pick up a copy of Scott's book and leave the guy a positive review to counterbalance all these liars that are on Amazon. It's so like I remember like I don't know how much you know about like how I started doing all this, but I was a Democrat for 20 years. I went to a Trump rally and then wrote an article about it and it went viral on the internet. And the next day I had all these people leaving reviews on my book that had nothing to do with either of those things.
Yep.
And it's like, okay, like what? It's like the most disheartening thing in the world. You're like, I worked so hard on this, and now this one thing is screwing it up. So guys, hook him up, man. Hook him up. So it sounds like you have a lot of crazy stories. So let's talk about some of your crazy stories. Let's put Princeton aside for a second. Tell us, what is the craziest story you have in your memoir?
Getting kidnapped in the Jordanian desert by a group of angry Bedouins, probably.
Okay.
So where to begin? I was really interested in all this stuff related to the Arab-Israeli conflict and the Middle East and all of that, and I was really interested in it in high school. And so my junior summer, after junior year of high school, I applied to this State Department-run program where they take kids and they send them off to like Jordan, China, Morocco, Turkey, like areas of strategic interest. So I went off Jordan. I was there to learn Arabic. I was living with a host family. It was great. It was mind-opening, cultural exchange, blah, blah, blah. But anyway, one weekend, we ended up going out to Petra and Wadi Rum, which is, it's the Great Rift Valley. It's just miles and miles of desert. It's just Jordanian desert. So we went to Petra in the morning, then we went to Wadi Rum in the afternoon. We're driving up this highway. It's like, it looks like Arizona or Montana or something. Like it just, what you see in a movie of like the car driving in a Western, the car driving off into the sunset. There's just nothing. It's just desert. So we stop in the middle of the highway somewhere, which was already kind of scary. And these like 4 or 5 Toyota 4x4s are like charging towards us. And I'm like, what's going on? Anyway, they stopped, they picked everyone up. They were like part of they're not, I would hardly call them hotels. They're more like, it's like glamping tents. They're like tents with the metal poles in them. They drive us out for like an hour into the desert to these like glamping tents. We're sitting in the backs of these Toyota 4x4s that are by no means built for sand. And they have these like mini mountains in the desert. I don't know how to describe them other than that they're just like little mountains. They're not miles high, but they're pretty big. Everyone in the group ends up, they want to climb this mini mountain to watch this gorgeous blood orange sunset. Everyone runs off to this one mountain. me and this other girl who I was with decided that wasn't high enough for our taste. That wasn't that didn't suit our fancy. So we ran off to one further away. And we ran, we climbed it like spider monkeys. We got to the top and we watched the most gorgeous blood orange sunset anyone has ever seen in their entire life. It was just amazing, spectacular, gorgeous, just absolutely awesome. The sun starts coming down, so we end up descending. Well, we watched the sunset, but we descended a different, like unbeknownst to us, we descended a different face of the mountain than the one we ascended by accident. And so when we got down to the desert, we walked towards the only lights we could see, which was not our camp. And we ran into probably the last person in the entire Jordanian desert that we wanted to run into, which is this guy named Ahmed. And he was super pissed at us for some reason. He's like, you guys must be the Americans. Fuck you. I'm not helping you. I hate you guys. And we're like, okay, like we are American, but I don't know if we're the Americans. Because he like seems to know who we are. And then eventually Katie starts, or whoever I was with, I don't remember what her name was, starts like telling him God brought us together to resolve our differences. And
I'm sure he appreciated that.
Well, he did actually, because she started with all of this, and then eventually he was like, okay, yalla, 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 like, let's go. Mm-hmm. So he puts us in the trunk of his car, literally not like in the back of the Toyota pickup truck. Wow. And he starts driving us around, and it's like 30 minutes now. We're driving into the desert. Katie, in the back of the window was open. So Katie starts explaining, is this live?
Yes.
Okay.
Not Katie.
The person I was with starts explaining to me in French because the window was open and the guy spoke English what had happened. So what basically happened was that, because she had figured it out, what basically happened was that this guy, like the State Department every year would book with this one Bedouin family. They would book the glamping tents. And then they thought they had booked everything. And then like 3 days before we got there, we were getting calls from this family. The State Department was getting calls from this family saying, why didn't you book with us this year? You booked us the last 15 years. And we're like, we did. We booked with this guy named Ahmed. And then we're like, well, he's from a totally different portion of the family. There's a big family dispute. You need to come with us. This is the one you do every year. So we called Ahmed and we were like, yo, like you just straight up lied about this. You're like from a totally different section of the family. Like this is a different set of tents and everything, like fuck you for lying to us. And we pulled like 30 reservations out from under this dude's ass at the last minute, which naturally pissed him off, hence the anger. So and then he got really pissed and he started calling us like at least 50 times, his uncles, his brothers, everyone. The phones were blowing up, like for the people who like led the program. We heard them ringing every 5 minutes. Or they told us that they were getting like 50 something phone calls. And so of all the people that we could run into in the Jordanian desert, well, at night, by the way, the desert's not a place that you want to be alone in at night. It's like, it's not a place where it's good to be fending for yourself, particularly if you don't know the terrain. Anyway, there's all kinds of things in the desert at night. And of all the people we could have run into in the Jordanian desert, we run into the one guy under whose ass we just pulled 30 reservations. So he's driving us around in this pickup truck. We're sitting in the trunk. I'm hearing all this stuff in French, trying to process what's going on while bouncing up and down like in the trunk. Another car pulls up. We have to change cars like 2 or 3 times. We had these little shitty Nokia phones that didn't have any there was no cell reception in the Jordanian desert. Sorry to disappoint anyone if they're gonna try to be on Twitter or Instagram out there, but no cell reception, anything. We're sitting there bouncing around in the truck. Another car pulls up. We changed cars like 2 or 3 times, and then eventually we got back to our camp. I have no idea what they were doing, like whether they were driving around looking for it or whether they were just bored and wanted to scare us or whatever. But at the end of the day, like decency pulled through and we got back. But that certainly is one of the, not the craziest, but one of the more crazy adventures that shows up in the story. And I share that among other things, just because while the New York Post article focused rather exclusively on my experience at Princeton. The Princeton occupies 1 out of 22 chapters in the book. The book is sort of it's a collection of personal essays about all kinds of interesting, crazy things that I've done, people that I've met, and scandalous or whatever encounters that I've had. And it's about me learning from my mistakes. It's very much reflective and retrospective. This one about Jordan is sort of one of the messages is like, if you're nice to someone, and we were as nice as we possibly could be to this guy Ahmed, at the end of the day, like, human decency pulled through. Like, we were at his mercy. There was what else were we going to do? Run off into the desert? So sometimes you just have to put your faith in people. And that was like one of the lessons I took away from that. But this is while I certainly do talk about Princeton, and I'm able to do that because I was there and I have like the insider experience or whatever you want to call it. This is not a book about Princeton or about college admissions or any of that. That's just one facet of the book that happened to be covered in a widely read New York Post article.
Totally. And I'm glad we're getting into some of the other stories, because I think your insight that, it's the mistakes that are actually the interesting part of the life experience. And I think, certainly with people at Princeton and schools like that, but definitely when they get out into the working world as well. And I even see this in people, probably like throughout their entire 20s, to be honest. It starts to deaden a little in their 30s, but people are so afraid of making mistakes. And I think, my approach to life is like, it's about experience. It is about experience, the good experience and the bad experience. And we learn best when we do something that we don't like, or we're like, that was a stupid decision. And then we know how to do it better next time, right?
Yeah, absolutely. There's that one quote, I think it's Carl Habert said, like, it's amazing how many people tiptoe cautiously through life, hoping to make it safely to death. And it's sort of how I live my life. It sounds like it resonates with what you were saying. Life is not sort of just sort of going through the motions and smoothly, doing everything by the book and, just sort of marching along in line. It's absolutely what you make of it. If you want to look at it like that, in some ways and I write about this in the book, it's a vanilla canvas, and it's our job to just chuck paint at the vanilla canvas and to add flavor and spice and variety and interesting experiences. No one else is going to do it for you. And certainly I know I've been privileged to be able to travel so much, but you don't need to travel to France or to some foreign country. You can go to the next city over after COVID. You can go to the next city over, the next town over, or wherever, and meet new people and talk to new people and have these new experiences. And I think certainly, trying new things, meeting new people, trying new foods at a minimum, but trying new things, meeting new people, and having new experiences is important, because it's only, and the same is true of so many things in my life. It's only when you step out of where you are that you're able to like see a lot of things. It's only with a little bit of distance, both physical and temporal. But check in with yourself and try new things. No one else is going to do it for you. It's very easy to say, well, that's not what other people are doing, or that's not the thing to do, or that's just not what's done. That's not the well-trod path. At the end of the day, you're the only one who has to live with the choices you make, or more specifically with the choices you didn't make. And it's much harder to live with choices you didn't make than with choices you did. Sitting there wondering about what might have been, and I write about this, like sitting there wondering about what might have been if only you'd done something differently, or if you'd taken the left exit instead of the right exit, is agonizing and horrible. You don't ever want to sit there wondering what would have happened if I took that job that I wasn't sure I could do, but maybe, or what would have happened if I had got on that one-way ticket, or what would, like me with Australia, frankly. I was supposed to be here for 4 months. It's now been a year, and it's going to be another year. I didn't want to go back to the United States and wonder what would have happened if I stayed in Australia, where I've sort of built a life for myself did the whole backpacking thing in the hostel circuit, which I can talk about. I think that's another misconception about people have this misconception that you need to have a lot of money to do backpacking. If it couldn't be further from the truth. Most of the backpackers I know are totally broke. They're working for accommodation at the hostels. They're working, paycheck to paycheck, and they're blissfully happy. They love it because they get to travel all around Australia. You stay in hostels, this whole new way of life. Certainly, I think stepping out of your comfort zone, and you're the only one, as I've said, at the end of the day, who's going to have to live with the choices you didn't make. So make like Nike and just do it.
Well, I mean, you said something. You said earlier, like, traveling after COVID. I mean, I've actually been traveling all summer, all fall, all over the United States. And one of the things about COVID for me that is so, I mean, frankly, like, I can't even think of the word, like crazy, is people are now so afraid to even leave their homes, let alone get on an airplane and go to a different state. And I just think it's incredibly sad. Now, you're in Australia, and I don't get the occasion to talk to many people in Australia. So what is it like there right now with the lockdowns?
Well, there aren't any.
There aren't any?
Well, Australia went hard and fast very early. Australia and New Zealand have been some of the best in the world, just statistically, with eradicating COVID. I think from February or March until June to July, February to about June, things were totally locked down. I left the city. I lived in a very remote area with some other people for very cheap because no one was renting. But now, certainly in the last few months, definitely since September, since I've been back in Sydney. But even I was traveling over the summer, which was winter here, just like backpacking around. And now that I'm back in Sydney, life is almost completely returned to normal.
Wow.
We had last week, actually, nightclubs opened, and you can stand up and dance, and weddings could have huge capacities, and everything was fine and everything was almost completely normal. No one's wearing masks in the streets. There's no, I think at some point we had a limit of 25 or 30 people per household for parties or whatever. But bars, restaurants, everything completely normal, very different to the US. I think the death rate, or the number of deaths, it's I mean, relatively speaking, I could Google it. Is very small, particularly compared to the US. Life was almost completely back to normal until 3 days ago. There was a small outbreak, and we still have small outbreaks every now and then. There was one in there's 7 states in Australia. I think, 7. I believe there's 7. Don't quote me on that. I have to recount. But there's a small one in Adelaide a few weeks ago. Now there's one in the northern beaches of Sydney that they seem to have under control, and that they're containing very well. But just for this week, they hit down with some restrictions. But other than before 3 days ago, and I think those will be lifted, frankly, once they contain this outbreak. Which I think they're doing. The contact tracing is fantastic, but life is almost completely returned to normal. So when people say to me, when are you coming back to the United States? Why aren't you coming back to the United States? My answer is, why would I come back to the United States? There's nothing to come back to. I can work here. I can live here. I can build a life for myself here until the United States calms down a little bit with 100,000 COVID cases a day.
Yeah, I mean, and especially you're from New York, which is a whole other situation. New York is ridiculous right now, so you're probably better staying right where you are. It's incredibly sad. I want to talk to you though, because someone in the chat mentioned, I think it was Miles, mentioned that you worked for Steve Scalise.
I did.
How was that?
It was a really interesting experience. I enjoyed being on Capitol Hill. It was really interesting sort of to see the gears of Washington at work. This is right after I graduated from high school. So it's kind of a crazy story, actually. I graduated from and I'll keep this short, but I graduated from high school in May of, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I graduated from high school in May of 2017. Then I went off and I worked for Scalise, and that was really interesting until somebody shot him while I was working for him. Like I was there for
You were there?
I didn't watch the bullets being fired,
Wow.
but I was in his office while that happened. Yes, I was working in his office while that happened. I got a text that morning at like 7 a.m. Someone was like, don't come to the office. There are sentries guarding the door. And I was like, what? Like, let me just drink my coffee and get to work. And then I got a text from another kid being like, no, like they're not letting anyone in and out of either the district office or the whip office, and which are in two separate buildings. And I was shocked. I was like, what's going on? So then we get a text. This is like 7 a.m. We had to be at work early, or 7:15 in the morning, saying the boss just got shot. The Hill, which is or the Hill or Politico, with the publications, are going to break this story. Don't tell your families or anything, but don't come to work. So at that point, I was like, what's going on? So we all stayed at home. That's the day that, and that was June 14th, 2017. And I got that day off. And at that point, I'd been waitlisted at Princeton. So I figured, all right, I have a day off. I'll write a letter to them saying, like reaffirming my interest. Because at that point, I was going to go to Duke. I wrote a letter to them affirming my interest. I sent it off, never thought I would hear from them again. A week or two later, whenever the internship ended, I left the internship and went to the UK to do another internship. And I was deported from the United Kingdom. So I was fingerprinted, photographed, detained for 9 hours, put with Iraqi and Syrian asylum seekers. Me and the people I was with were separately interrogated. They counted all my pairs of underwear. I had Advil. They were like, what's this? I'm like, it's Advil. And they were like, what's Advil? I was like, are you kidding, man? And I asked the officer, I was like, what's your name? He's like, my name is Agent 6542, whatever. Very unfriendly bloke. I was locked up in this detention center. They took your phone for 9 hours. By the way, the most ridiculous part of all this is that while I was locked up in this, I wasn't in jail. I was in an immigration detention, because apparently you needed, the reasoning for this was that you needed a visa in the UK for an unpaid internship. It was the only country in Europe at the time you needed a visa for a brief unpaid internship.
Wow.
So I got caught in this whole bureaucratic spider web as a 19-year-old that I had no business being caught in. And I asked the company ahead of time, do I need a visa? And they specifically said no, because this is at the whole time that Brexit was happening. And I knew that, maybe they're going to be tough on the border or whatever. I didn't think I fell into the category of needing a visa. Anyway, I'm in this detention center. They're playing Dunstan Checks In, which is this movie about a kid and his pet ape. I don't know if it's a Disney movie, but it's this kid and his pet orangutan who go around and like terrorize this hotel. And I thought this is probably the last thing these Syrian and Iraqi asylum seekers want to be watching right now, is some children's movie about a kid and his pet orangutan. That's one thing I remember about that incident, just a bizarre detail. Anyway, the day I get back from, and this is relating to I'm getting back to the Steve Scalise thing. The day I get back from my internship, I get a call from a 609 area code, which is New Jersey. And I thought it was my high school because I went to high school in New Jersey, but it wasn't. It was Princeton, and I don't know, maybe someone took a gap year. I don't know what happened, but a bed freed up, and they said, "Hey, we have a spot. Do you want it?" And I was over the moon. I was like, I get, yeah. I went up to I took a train to Princeton that evening to walk around campus, because I had kind of made my decision to deviate from the Ivy League, and because I got into 6 of the 8 Ivy League schools, but I made my decision to deviate from that, and once Princeton called, that was the 6th. I went to campus, and then I said, I'm going there. So everything happens for a reason. It's rather, I just sort of confluence of circumstance that I happened to be working for Scalise while he got shot, which was a monumental event in recent, political history. That stuff is not supposed to happen in the United States. It just doesn't happen anymore, but it did. And I knew the security guard too. No, personally, I don't text him every day, but I knew him from going to the office. This guy, David Bailey, who was shot as well. So I was there when that happened. And then, it was obviously very tragic and sad. And the day that he was shot, we had a day off, and I happened to send a letter to Princeton, and then I also happened to get deported. And it just like life happens. You don't plan these things. You just react and you roll with the punches, basically.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, you've lived a very interesting life, and you're only 22 years old. So Lord knows, I'm sure you're going to have many more adventures ahead. Do you have any regrets so far about things you've experienced or decisions you've made?
Yeah, absolutely. And the book is filled with them. I want people to learn from my mistakes like that. The book is about the things that I screwed up, that I messed up along the way, from how I potentially handled past, particularly, a bunch, like in a variety of experiences, but to use one example, how I handled like past relationships, or how I treated the college admissions process, or literally any. I don't want to give too much away about the book, but the book is filled with regrets, because this isn't just a celebration of me talking about how wonderful everything has been. It's the good, the bad, and the scary. There's a lot of things I regret, but I don't sit there and, other than the what might have been thing. For the most part, I don't sit there and kick myself thinking about what would have happened if I'd done this, what would have happened if I did that. The harsh reality is that your life is what it is. You are the choices that you have made, and all you can do is learn from them and move forward. And with each chapter, I try to include like a little lesson or moral or whatever thing that I learned from it, from whatever experience I had that I was writing about. And certainly, I think regret is a dangerous thing, because if you hold on to it, it can make you mean, and it can make you maybe cold or vindictive, to sit there and just be constantly regretting everything. So I don't think I regret things. I don't dwell on regret, because it has no value, really. But I certainly think that reflection is the redeeming part of that. If you regret something, reflect on it, ask yourself what you could have done differently, and do it. But on the flip side of that token, one thing I would say, and I think Paul Arden said this, it's better to regret what you've done than what you haven't. And I want to harp on this point, because it's really important. It sucks to be sitting there kicking yourself, thinking, what would have happened if I had done this, right? Like, you don't want to sit around and be thinking about what you haven't done. Do something, and if you screw it up, whether like going to Princeton, for example, I am glad that I went there in the end. I think if I had, I don't know whether I'm glad, or this is a difficult conversation, but you learn from everything you do, and I think while you can, it's fine to regret. I think it's better, as I've said in the quote, it's better to regret something you've done than when you haven't. And just all you got to do is reflect on it and then move on with your life. Easier said than done, but that's what I would say.
Well, I mean, I think I want to make the argument that I think going to Princeton was actually exactly what you needed, because you said a couple things. One, everything happens for a reason. I 100% believe that, whether it's a good thing or a bad thing. You got that call, that that bed opened up for a reason, and I think you were meant to be there for a reason. And sometimes the mistakes that we make set us up for the things that we need to do. I mean, I did marketing for like the first half of my career. I hated it, but I happened to be really good at it. And so, but it set me up to be able to do what I'm doing today, because I know how to do all this stuff that a lot of people don't know how to do. So I think you've probably made exactly the right choices, and you've taken advantage of them. So let me ask you this. So you said you're working on another book, or you have another book coming out. What is it about?
The next book is fiction, actually, because as I said before, really write nonfiction other than journalism. This was new for me, which is exciting. But my next book is going to be about, I'm working through a couple different titles now, but it's going to be about a young kid, probably in the 16 to 17 area, who is from New York and leaves New York and goes and lives in Paris by himself for one summer and sort of eats, prays, loves, and, figures things out. Like, it's very much another sort of Holden Caulfield coming of age story. This time it's fiction though. I did happen to move to Paris by myself when I was 16 and live there on my own. And I wrote actually my first novella there, a short novel. But this is a highly embellished and fictionalized version of that. And it's slated to publish in July. Very much, I mean, people have compared me or the style that I'm writing. Like, a lot of people say Bret Easton Ellis, a lot of people say Jay McInerney or J.D. Solinger for Catcher in the Rye, Charles Bukowski I get sometimes. So it was very much in the same tone and voice and style that you're getting from the first one. If you liked it, it's just this time it's fiction, so you'll have to guess which parts are true and which aren't. Certainly a lot of it is, or parts of it anyway, are rooted in truth and experiences that I've had, because you write what you know. But this one I'm calling fiction because it is. And then I'll probably, frankly, write a third one about the Australia years as well, because I only got to Australia. Well, the book finishes in August of 2019 when I started writing it. It spans 8 years. It goes from 14 to 21, or no, that's not 8 years. That's 7, 14 to 22, wherever you want to end it. 21, really. I'm 22 now. But the book spans from 14 to 21, and I only got to Australia in February. So if you think the experiences in this book were crazy, there's stuff that's happened in Australia, from someone breaking into our house in the middle of the night and stealing our car to, all kinds of other stuff. I don't want to, to all kinds of other stuff, to living through COVID for one. There's plenty more crazy stories to come.
Right on. Well, guys, again, Scott's book is in the description below. I definitely recommend everyone pick up a copy. He did send me a copy. I read some of it. I didn't read all of it, I have to admit, that other stuff, but I definitely enjoyed what I read. And I have to say, Bret Easton Ellis is one of my favorite writers. So I think that's a pretty apt and a good comparison, something to strive up towards. All right, guys. And again, remember, if you buy Scott's book, do him a solid and leave him a positive review on Amazon to balance out all those awful cancel people that didn't like the New York Post article. I'm sure he'll appreciate that. And Scott, where can people find you if they want to learn more or get in touch?
They can find me on Instagram. snewman477 is my Instagram, or they can email me, snewman477@gmail.com. It's the same thing. Just reach out to me. I'm happy to talk. I'm not one of those private people who will ignore your messages. Reach out to me, follow me. I post things about the book, about my journey, about my life all the time. And I love connecting with my fans and connecting with people. So feel free to reach out, and we can get a dialogue going.
Right on. Well, thank you again for coming on the channel tonight. I really appreciate it. I think that you're fascinating. And I think, again, I want to emphasize this because I don't know if you appreciate this at 22, but you really are exceptional in the way that you're looking at things. And I truly can't wait to see where you go. So I'm so excited I got to have you on my channel early. So I'll I think that's a really good thing. I'm really excited about it. But thank you for coming out tonight. Guys, thank you in the chat for hanging out with us for a little bit. If you enjoyed this interview with Scott, please make sure to smash that like button. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, all that good stuff. And I'll see you guys soon.